Oh, hello there, yes. Well, so begins another weary day. Yes, Madness, Grade A, standalone single. Still available on, I don't know, how many compilations albums is it now? Ooh, it must be at least 4, 5, something like that. Anyway, leaving all that aside, I thought today we'd have a bit of a longer video. Got a bit of time on my hands. After all, I'm bored. Don't see why you shouldn't be. I thought we'd have a look at Andre Walker, who I used to sort of bang on about a few years ago, but I can't be bothered at the moment. The thing that gets me about Andre, most of all, is he represents your sort of grifter by numbers, almost. He's an archetypal grifter in the way that all the others are, all your Lawrence Foxes and your Calvin Robinsons and the rest of them. But he's still there. He's still allowed to be on Talk TV, even though he puts out stuff like You're About to See. And, you know, if you want to be a nasty right-wing bigot, that's your choice, if you like. It's just that I don't think that people that tune in for him necessarily are very aware of the kind of thing that he puts out when he's, well, out, really. Might seem reasonably soft and cuddly in a Talk TV studio, but it's just really nasty. It's also intellectually incoherent. I know that the guy is reasonably bright because people like this always are. You know, he's got a diploma, certificate, or whatever it is in journalism, so he knows what the truth is, or at least on a theoretical level. But this thing never realistically touches it, whilst at the same time warping our sensibilities or our ideas about what exactly might be going on. And then at the end, well, we'll deliver, I think, what hopefully will be the coup de grace, or indeed the sting in the tail, or indeed the pointing something out, which is a bit of an elephant in the room with Andre. So let's dive into this. Let's see what we've got, shall we?
Britain is facing a project of ethnic cleansing where indigenous British people that have ruled these islands for thousands of years will be moved out in favour of a new population from Pakistan and the Islamic world that will render Britain effectively a colony of Pakistan and indeed of other countries. Now, this is a radical view and something that most of us are uncomfortable talking about. But actually, this video isn't about news, and it isn't actually about the opinions of me. I want to tell you a little story and then see whether you want to watch the video after that. I guarantee you will.
Right, I can't guarantee that you will. Anyway, yeah, there's a very bold assertion there from Andre. I do like the way that he has just sidestepped slightly from that. But of course he's talking about, well, you know, your standard great replacement theory here. Yeah, except it's all being run from, I don't know, presumably caves in Pakistan. But just straight off the bat, we haven't ruled ourselves for thousands of years because we got invaded by the Normans who took over. And they were Viking bastards, weren't they? Yeah, you may recall that. And don't even get me started about the Scots invading a number of times coming south. They haven't done that for a while, thank God, but you can't really trust them. You know what they're like, them lot. And, the Glorious Revolution, which was, well, not particularly glorious, where we got invaded by a Dutch army. Still, that's just me knowing things about history. Might come back to that concept.
I've got a friend of mine whose ambition it was to always live in the United Kingdom, who now no longer thinks that's a very good idea. And I'll tell you the reason. He is ethnically part Belarusian and part Ukrainian, but was born in Moldova. Now, in this part...
Right. From what I understand from the right-wing viewpoint about people's ethnicity, I don't think you can be ethnically three things. I don't think that works. You mean he's just generically sort of Ukrainian? Is that it? Or is he Belarusian? Or is he Moldovan? They are three separate countries these days. Not too sure about that. Still, anyway, his friend, who I'm sure very much exists, who's always wanted to come here. What, you mean like an economic migrant, maybe?
Parts of the world, there is a significant level of ethnic cleansing and it's been going on for thousands of years. As an example, Vladimir Putin always said that the reason that he invaded Ukraine was because of the treatment by the Ukrainian army of ethnic Russians in places like Crimea. And of course, when the Russians invaded, they ethnically cleansed ethnic Ukrainians out the way. We all know about the Holocaust, fairly obviously one of the worst examples of ethnic cleansing of them all. And of course, in 1943, 1 in 4 people from Belarus was murdered over 2 or 3 months by the German army. We've also seen the invasion of Poland and all of these sorts of things. So,
right, and once again, don't enormously recognise that. Andre's got a vague idea about the activities of the Wehrmacht during the 1940s in places like, Poland and Belarus in particular, and Ukraine to a very, very large extent. Don't recognise the 1943 bit at all. I think it's just made that up from something half remembered. That was one distinct nation invading that part of the world with genocidal intent. It doesn't quite match the sorts of things that he's going to go on to describe, or, well, I don't know, what's a polite way of putting it? Make up. Anyway, it doesn't work, all right? You know, if you want a history of that sort of time, I've said it before, you can read Snyder's Bloodlands. It goes into that in a great deal of detail, and it doesn't spare the Soviet Union and Stalin either. Just to make sure that those of you that are gonna go be out there saying about what a lovely guy Hitler was and what an evil man Stalin was, it does them both, okay? It wasn't a great place to be, but the primary thing about that is it was one nation invading another nation, all right? It wasn't as such, well, it was ethnic cleansing, but not the way that Andre is going to, well, warp reality here.
In Eastern Europe, they know probably better than anywhere else how to ethnically cleanse, whether that be the Balkans or indeed the place I've talked about. But critically, they do it in 2 ways. They obviously have these mass genocides, but obviously what they also do is the low level, moving people on and changing the nature of the population. My friend, who is not a public or political figure, genuinely believes that's what's happening in Britain. And when he first saw this country, he recognised a lot of the things that happened in Eastern Europe, more on that in a moment. And he believed that Rishi Sunak was the person responsible. The reason he thought that is because he simply assumed if you have an Indian Prime Minister and there's ethnic cleansing going on, the 2 things must be linked. Obviously, he later realised they weren't.
No, it would be foolish to have that kind of idea whereby you just assume that people, because you know of what they look like, hold a particular set of opinions. That would be idiotic, wouldn't it, Andre? Wouldn't it, Andre? Yes.
His take on it was remarkable. When he looked at the King's speech a year or 2 ago, he watched the choir at the end and said the following. That choir was picked because it had the minimum number of white children.
Right, this is the choir. You can have a look at that from Sky News, link down below. You can see they've got the absolute minimum number of white children. Absolute minimum, haven't they? Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Oh, yeah, I can't really spot any there. Can you?
Wow. I've never really thought of it like that. But in fact, he has a whole take on the way that Britain is being run, which suggests very heavily that Britain is discriminating against its own indigenous population.
Maybe presumably in favour of Moldovians who don't really know what their ethnic background is. I don't know.
Now, what I asked him to do then was this. Make a list of the things that happen in Eastern Europe that discriminate against people in order to ethnically cleanse them. And let's just take a look at whether we recognise that in Britain.
Right, and at this point, you see, we are into the realms of fantasy here. I don't know where, I've had a reasonable look today, but I don't know where Andre has got this list of 10 things. Yeah, it's always 10, isn't it? Your commandments have always got to be 10, there's 10 of them. Link down below to the actual sort of 10 agreed definitions of what makes a genocide. If you want to, it's 10. It's always a handy number. But I love the way that when he's going through this list, he kind of just brushes over some of them because they don't apply. Right. There's no good having a list of 10 things that don't apply then, is it? Is it?
Oh my God. The list that I'm going to go through with you today will leave you absolutely stunned. Now, just to explain, my mate genuinely believes that whilst there is ethnic cleansing going on, he believes that we're doing it to ourselves and effectively our society is self-aborting. Also what he believes, and I'm not necessarily endorsing this, what he says is that we are wrong when we believe in a multicultural society. What will happen is one culture will win, one culture will lose. This whole idea of everyone rubbing along side by side is not right.
Right, okay, and do notice the get out of jail free card there, that he doesn't necessarily agree with it. Will mine make a video which appears like you do then?
Actually happen is that your culture will be replaced by somebody else's, and actually you've got to stand up for your own tribe. And so English for the English, and Belarus for the Belarusians, and Pakistan for the Pakistanis. Anything that you do beyond that will not work. And all of these left-wing lawyers who believe that we can be in a situation whereby everybody is equal, everybody is the same, and everybody has a right to live in Burnley, that will not result in Britain being enriched. It will simply result in a takeover.
Right, okay. Lefty lawyers and other lawyers have to work on the basis that everyone is equal, because that's the way the law works. And I don't know what he's got. I don't know. I like Burnley. I'd happily move to Burnley. Yeah, I don't feel I have a right to live in Burnley. That's not part of the makeup. But I mean, yeah, I like Burnley. Basically anywhere that begins with B in Yorkshire is quite nice. Anyway.
An experience in history has taught us it's always better to discover than be discovered. Of course, we live in a world where people complain about colonialism whilst creating enclaves of Pakistanis in the UK. Okay, so this video goes through the list of how to ethnically cleanse in Eastern Europe and invites you to ask yourself whether you recognise any of the things on the list. I will give you little bits of help here and there. But before I do that, I just want to say one of the ways that we're fighting back against the ethnic cleansing of British people is the Patriot Fund. We give money to small projects and we help people out who are trying to get messages out in their community and defend our cause. You can donate on...
Right, and there's the grift. Right, I didn't think that you necessarily agreed with it, but it appears that statement that you do. Yes, I don't know. I've not delved into the particular in and outs of his donations, but I don't know how much of it actually goes. I don't know. Maybe he'd like to give us more details of the figures. Probably not.
PayPal, the link is below. Please do help us, and I'll give you the monthly update which is sent to everybody. Okay, let me go through the headlines of the way that you ethnically cleanse in Eastern Europe. They are property, violence and coercion, population, siege mentality, culture and symbolic destruction, media, psychological and social tactics, jobs, justice and paramilitary force. So let's start first of all with population. What you do first of all to ethnically cleanse people, it's the most important bit of them all, is that you start moving in a new population by incentivising either immigration or migration. So you start to create that enclave of new people moving into the area. You can't do anything unless you start with that. So you need things like the Afghan resettlement scheme or uncontrolled immigration in order to do it. But you've also got to incentivise it with things like free healthcare and indeed access to jobs and access to housing, because obviously people have got to want to come to an area which is quite alien to them and populate it. And obviously that takes a certain amount of gumption to do it, and so you need to persuade people. So point number one is on population, and what you have to do is start getting a new population to come in the thousands and millions, and you do that by opening your borders and indeed encouraging people.
Yeah, no mention of wars as a push factor here. It's just simply people with gumption. Well, that's good to know, isn't it? It's probably a lot more than Andre's audience. Decide to come here, but they need real incentives to do so. Not being shelled or indeed ethnically cleansed. Such thoughts are far indeed from Andre's precious little head.
Then what you do is you encourage a high birth rate amongst the new population with policies like allowing multiple marriages, with policies like social security, and you discourage a high birth rate from the existing population with things like, in this country, abortion, which obviously many migrants won't do, but British people will. And slowly but surely what you start to do is tip the balance, and the area starts to look more and more like the country that people have come from. Obviously, there's elements of infrastructure as well, and we'll come on to that in a moment. But the first and most important thing is get them here and get them having children.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. The whole abortion thing, we'll come back to that because he actually contradicts himself. But this is simply people with higher birth rates, isn't it? There are other groups that have been settled in the UK for a long period of time, usually religious ones anyway, with high birth rates. You might think about, some of the more orthodox Jewish communities in North London have enormously high birth rates. It's to do with their religion. It's not anything else. And low birth rates are a worldwide phenomenon outside of Africa. But here he's not necessarily talking about Africa, is he? He's talking about Asia. So, I don't know, make up your mind, mate. And since when has Britain sanctioned multiple marriages and multiple wives? That's a new one on me. Maybe that was in the King's speech and I was too busy counting people in the choir.
Point number one. Point number two, violence and coercion. A lack of police action on violence against the existing population. So that is to say that if you walk down the street and people punch you for being a white guy, nobody does anything about it in the police. You absolutely suppress ethnic violence against this group and you don't take any police action on it. That means that things start to feel hostile. You recognise the new population coming in and the new population is allowed to hurt you and get away with it. Rape and sexual violence, it is vital that the new group are encouraged to use rape and sexual violence against the existing population. First of all, to break their spirit, but secondly, to encourage more anchor babies. So more and more of the population is sort of brought in. This is why Yazidi women were taken into rape gangs. It's why actually in the Islamic world rape gangs are quite common. But what you do is, first of all, you destroy the spirit and the will of the families by raping their daughters. But then what you do is you ensure that those daughters themselves have babies and now have mixed emotions. Whilst they've been raped by this community, they also now bear the babies of that community as well. So
Right, and yes, sorry, does that count as part of your abortion thing that you were saying earlier or not? Because that's directly contradictory. And you may notice, well, the moment you think about that, you think, no, that just isn't a thing, is it? It's just not a thing. That isn't the way that it's happening. We don't have vast numbers of multiracial children in presumably Burnley, do we? Necessarily for that reason. That just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't add up. Sorry, Andre.
That is absolutely vital. Then those community leaders that complain about it, you lock up in prison. And we have seen people, we have seen that happen. It has to be said. It's not on a wide scale, but certainly people who've complained about rape and sexual violence and no-go areas have been locked up. Next point on property. Housing priority will now go to the new population. And we've seen that in Britain, haven't we, where whilst you're not officially whilst you're officially not entitled to a council house anymore by being a new migrant, what you are entitled to a council house is if you are somebody who's got no family in the area and are homeless, which is more likely to be a migrant family. So in fact, property does favour new arrivals. Then you have to remove the old population from property and move new people in. Now actually, in Britain, that's kind of the same thing.
Right, right. So we've got this situation where new families are coming in, even though these people don't have families, which means they're going to have priority to the social housing, which isn't there. And, you can look at social housing in the UK and most of it is non-existent. Now, councils have a statutory right to house homeless people, and the vast majority of people that are homeless don't go into social housing because there isn't social housing. I think Andre, as a journalist, needs to have a look at the housing sector. I know it involves doing some stuff and having a think about it, but you can see the way that just doesn't make any sense. Anyway, I'm sure that he won't come on to the subject of veterans anytime soon.
Because it's council houses that were previously given to British families, now going to ethnic minority families that have arrived more recently. So that means that the housing stock now slowly but surely starts to go as a priority. And what you do, by the way, is you let the ordinary people go out on the streets in favour of housing the new arrivals. Hence why you make sure that soldiers, veterans are not given accommodation, but asylum seekers are.
Yes, you can see that presumably that was another priority in the King's speech that I missed because of the choir. Yeah, you can see it's just this is a kind of ticking boxes exercise. Andre, throughout his career, because I've been following this guy for quite a while now. He was the first person to ban me on Twitter or bar me on Twitter. He has this kind of tick list of things that he has to say. The only thing that astounds me about this video is he doesn't slag off Harry and Meghan. That's, I think, the only thing he leaves off the list. But all of it is there, okay? And it doesn't really matter. It gets shoehorned in. So, obviously, veterans. Now, the last Conservative government had 14 years to decide to do something about veterans, but didn't. And it wasn't because of migrants, was it? It's because they don't care. And, you know, all of the kind of people that Andre is, broadly speaking, here in favour of also don't care. If we do end up with a reform government at some stage in the near future, you will still see blokes, what are ex-squaddies, crouching in doorways. It ain't going to be a priority. The only person I've heard who would have made homeless, street sleeping, a priority from the last decade was that nasty Mr. Corbyn.
Then this is interesting on property. Didn't think about this. The regular looting of shops to ensure that they're not viable, to destroy local businesses. That is the shoplifting epidemic. Do not prosecute shoplifting because it makes the shops of the British population not viable. And once the housing is discriminating, once lots of people move to your area and your daughter's been raped and your house has been taken off you and your shops have started to close down in favour of other shops that are not being looted, that is, of course, starting just to ratchet up that pressure.
Yes, I don't know about the shops in Burnley. Does that mean that the Asian shops, or in particular the Pakistani shops in Burnley, are not being looted or shoplifted from? I don't know. It'd be an interesting exercise for Andre to, well, completely not bother with. Yes, I don't know. I guess it's all a concerted campaign being run from caves in Pakistan. Is it? Strikes me as vaguely unlikely, but you know me as a lefty, I have problems with, concepts like that. Yeah, I just tend to, deal with things that I think are reality. Anyway.
An effect. Siege mentality. Okay, make sure access to public services like doctor's appointments becomes increasingly difficult. That is because you can't actually go about your everyday life anymore without it becoming tiresome and difficult. You can't drive down the street without it being 20 miles an hour, or you get a fine for doing all sorts of things which are crazy. But fundamentally, your ability to actually access services is hard. Now, remember what we've done now. We've brought in a new population. We've discriminated against housing and etc. There's violence. And now actually to access the services you need is becoming very hard. That's encouraging you to leave so that you'll be obviously in a place where those public services are easier to access.
Yes. So if you live in a 20-mile-an-hour area, it's because the Pakistani rape gangs have organised it that way. They don't obey the 20-mile-an-hour limit or something. They don't have to worry about that because they're too busy queuing up at the GPs that they've restricted access to. Yeah, me neither.
Okay. So the next point, surround the remaining enclaves of the existing population with no-go areas. That's kind of related to the sexual violence that was before, which of course, once again, now it's quite hard because, to get to my local shop now, I have to walk through this area. But if I walk through this area, I'll get punched and the police won't do anything. Okay, so next, God, this is a bad one because it's happening in London. Change the names of critical infrastructure to reflect the new population. The Windrush line. And all of these new railway lines, which are named after, instead of British history, they're named after the values and the interests of the new population. So suddenly, your local sign in Southall railway station is now in Urdu or Punjabi or whatever, just so it shows you that no longer you are in charge. And just
yeah, and of course he broadens it out neatly into just anyone that's brown. So you notice it's the Windrush line, which was just bleeding awful, wasn't it? It'd be really awful calling it that, yeah. But the problem here, of course, is that, well, you know, a lot of these people that are, I don't know, probably use the Windrush line were born here. And they get a vote. And, you know, they vote for, you know, those evil Sadiq Khan-style mayors who end up naming places. It's not much of a plot, really, is it? Is it? Yes, of course it is, because of the Pakistanis from their caves who are naming the things the Windrush line, as they do. Probably getting those GP appointments, though, aren't they? Gits.
Minding you constantly. Now, let's go to cultural and symbolic destruction. Burn down the religious institutions of the existing population or make sure they close because they're no longer viable. The burning down has happened of churches, I accept not to a large extent in the United Kingdom, but certainly the closure of churches and the removal of that infrastructure has become a thing.
Yes, and yes, because it isn't a thing, all right? Every once in a while, one of these commentators will go on about churches being burnt down. It's always a bunch of bored kids that have got a box of matches or a lighter these days, let's face it. Yeah, that's what that is. You can look this stuff up. It isn't a thing. And I'm sorry, but, you know, are the Pakistani grooming Muslim gangs who are naming things the Windrush line also making people not believe in God here? Is that what's happening? Because an awful lot of these, you know, migrants that come here are very religious. So what is it? What do you want? Do you want churches to be full or empty? And if they're empty, surely they should be used for housing, as indeed a lot of them are. I don't know. What he's complaining about, of course, is mosques. That's the idea, isn't it? Yeah, they're all bad, except they tend to, whenever the people can get round to it in terms of, you know, giving. Oh dear, that's a bad thing, isn't it? Yeah, giving things. They tend to build their own, yeah? But there are waves of migrants that have done that. You often find, for example, things like old Methodist chapels, which during the 1940s maybe became a synagogue, which after that maybe became, I don't know, a Sikh-run or indeed a temporary mosque. It's very common and it's been going on for hundreds of years. Not the thousands, because we don't go back that far. Sorry, Andre.
Pull down the statues of historical figures so your history and your heritage is no longer visible. You can see the new religious institutions of the new population. You can see names of streets being changed and institutions being changed, and your statues are being pulled down just to say, boom, not welcome.
I would like anybody to point out a statue in London that's been pulled down. Just one, all right? Not your fourth plinth. That's been empty for a long time. That's been empty forever, okay? But just a statue in London that's been pulled down. Answers on a postcard. Any ideas, Andre? No, of course not. We don't deal with those kind of things.
Remove history books. God, it is crazy, this list. Remove history books from academic institutions and replace them with the history of the new population. Start teaching in schools that your history is terrible and the history of the people that have arrived is great. Wow.
Yeah, wow. I'm a teacher. I teach history. It's not a thing. Wow. Absolute balderdash and bunkum. As my old maths teacher, Mr. Bowman, would have said, probably just before he threw a chalk duster at my head. Ouch.
Unbelievable. Psychological and social tactics. This is actually about media propaganda, and also he explained about things like allowing multilingualism and whatever, and kind of discriminating against the language itself. Not as relevant to the United...
Oh no, Andre, I think it's really relevant that we talk about the media and representation in the media, yeah? Because, of course, we have groups like GB News who will willingly employ very tokenistic gay people, black people, but they have to always conform to exactly this particular mindset, yeah? Because that way we can say, oh, well, we can't be racist, you know, because look, we have Nana and her show, so we can't be racist, and we can't be homophobic because look, we had Darren Grimes. Well, not recently, of course, because he's got a new grift, hasn't he? Yeah, making sure that pride flags don't go up in in the north of the country. God, I wonder if he's going to move to Barnsley soon. Anyway.
United Kingdom, it has to be said. Jobs. Oh my God. Positive discrimination in jobs favouring the new population over the old population. Point number 2. Ensure the government is dominated by the new population, so all of those plum jobs in local government now go to the new people instead of the old people, and we make sure that we're protecting that group. So it just feels like the area is starting to change.
Right. Okay. So so we just it's the whole DEI tick list. I don't know. If anyone can give me an example of a job that isn't an internship at the BBC where that's actually a thing, I'd be very interested. I'd be very interested to find out. But invariably, when you say, you get people in your comments, they go, oh, it's dreadful, isn't it? There's all those jobs that white people can't apply to. You ask them for one, and they dig out something from 2 years ago that's an internship at the BBC. Something they couldn't apply for anyway. But I don't think you can count like 4 jobs a year as being, an example of ethnic cleansing. Anyway.
And employment law based on ethnicity rather than competence. And I think we've seen that, where there are quotas for Asian and black people, but there are no quotas for white people. And so that discrimination happens all the time. I will tell you, when I used to be a contributor at the BBC, they used to phone me all the time and say, Andre, we'd love somebody who's like you, but have you got anyone black? Otherwise, we won't hire you. £300 job, you're not going to get it because...
Right, £300 is the sort of standard appearance fee, okay? But I'm sorry, nobody's going to ring Andre up to not offer him a job. All right, that doesn't happen. Now, it might be that he's had conversations where people say that they're after someone with a particular point of view. I don't know. It might be somebody who's like Andre. Don't want to use any particular words here because, after all, that might be unfair. Might not. It's not, is it? But farcical nonsense that the BBC would ring him up and not offer him a job. No. Okay? No. But of course the media is constructed, isn't it? The media, I don't know, let's try and think of some media. Let's think of an internet-based news service which is run by a non-dom billionaire. Oh, I know, Talk Radio, Talk TV, yes, where Andre works. He doesn't want to talk about that. I wonder why.
Because the colour of your skin. So that's the issue in terms of jobs. Justice, 2-tier justice, and a domination of the police and the courts. That is to say, the police's job now is to ensure that the new population feels protected, whilst the old population gets a separate justice system, which is far more draconian, far more bullying, and far more likely to result in criminal prosecution. And of course, that 2-tier justice system, I think we've seen in Britain.
Yeah, indeed. I'd love to see Andre having a chat with Stephen Lawrence's parents about all of that stuff, because I think their perception of it is somewhat different.
Ensure the government, constant surveillance and harassment by the police. So instead of the police worrying about dealing with the fact that you're being beaten up on the streets, instead they're spying on you and knocking on your door to complain about all the things that you said. Not necessarily locking you up or prosecuting you, but just harassing you and needling you to make you feel extremely uncomfortable and extremely nervous.
Yeah, a bit like, Stephen Lawrence's parents. Yes.
Criminal law that makes everyday life illegal. Oh my God. What that is hate speech. It's saying that if you want to have a legitimate political debate in the way that you always had a political debate, that is now illegal. If you want to insult the Islamic faith, that is now illegal. Normal stuff that is part of your everyday life is illegal. A young kid who accidentally drops a Quran, crime. Mentioning on Twitter you're anti-immigration, crime. Saying by, Lucy Conley, that she doesn't care if somebody burns down a migrant hotel, crime, crime, crime. Your everyday life is now illegal, and that makes it incredibly difficult for you.
Yeah, God, yeah, we can really see that, what with, just think about all those claims about anti-Semitism. After all, it's anti-Semitic to do everything, isn't it? You're not allowed to criticise Israel at all. That's instantaneously anti-Semitic, but thank God that doesn't fall under that category. Might come back to that in a short while.
To function, and paramilitary force, that is to allow the formations of de facto militias to bully the local population. Now, they don't have to be formalised, but these are marauding gangs, potentially selling drugs to the existing population and beating them up. Also, ensure that those groups can guarantee that no-go areas are created to make the whole place feel extremely hostile. And finally, the
I live in a very multicultural area. According to the Daily Telegraph's crime survey, it's actually a high crime area. I think it's laughably low crime compared to some of the places where I've lived. It's just I haven't really noticed any militia around, Druze or Hezbollah or otherwise. Perhaps I'm just missing something here.
Paramilitary groups will run the campaigns of rape and indeed the other unpleasant bits that the police themselves can't carry out, but the police themselves will turn a blind eye to all of it. Now, I don't care what you think about my political views, and I don't really worry too much about yours. We have a right to debate and be open and free. But if you...
Well, that's good, isn't it? Because then I can call you all sorts of things that are going to upset you. Okay? I mean, this is at the most gentle level. This is ethno-nationalism. It's the Great Replacement theory as a textbook example, and this is basically what we would describe, going back to the good old days as crypto-fascism, because of course he can't admit that this is a fascist thing that he's starting to say here, right? Okay, this is just nasty, blatant racism, full stop, bluntly.
You listen to that list and you say, I do not recognise the United Kingdom from that list, I think you are stark raving mad. Now, there are other things that I didn't list. There are things like genocides. There are things like burning down, all sorts of things that don't happen in Britain, and thank God for that. But if you were to say, is Britain A, supporting ordinary British people, or B, mounting a low-level campaign of ethnic cleansing, you would have to go with option B.
No, I wouldn't. Anyway, convenient place to finish that. It goes on for about another 5 minutes, but I don't want to bore you any more with that. Make up your own minds. Make up your own minds, as ever. Yeah, there you go. Now, this guy's on Talk TV. He's been let go at least once from some of these gigs, but it astounds me that somebody that puts things like this out is allowed, even on a Murdoch channel. Now, the real elephant in the room here, okay, I mean, it's easy to pick apart all of the usual sort of right-wing cant that's there. It's always just about vibes, isn't it? It's always just the emotive stuff about how dangerous everybody are, dangerous people, especially in Burnley. Yeah, it's not the sort of place that Moldovians feel safe, or something. Anyway, the real elephant in the room here, of course, is that Andre is a good friend of the state of Israel. At least once he's gone out as a guest of the Israeli state to, stare at Gaza whilst it's being bombed. I'd like Andre to apply this to the Israeli state and their actions in Gaza, the West Bank, and, certain other places like, in the borders of Lebanon. Let's have this list applied there, Andre, shall we? No, because of course that actually is ethnic cleansing in a real sense, with, actually very, very large numbers of people being moved out. And if they don't move out, by God, they'll end up somewhere very, very nasty, dangling on the end of the rope whilst a number of soldiers decide that they're going to use their rifles in really interesting ways. So, at best, I think Andre needs to ask himself some questions, because if he's defending that, then he's defending, ethnic cleansing and indeed genocide. And I think people that defend genocide ought to have a very, very strong spotlight shone on them. I'm not a great fan of the death penalty, but for war crimes I certainly am. And I think those people that cheer on war crimes should at least be given a great deal of grief in their life, because that's just so deeply, deeply immoral. And of course, as ever, with all the rest of the grifters, he makes money from this. He's paid to do this, in essence. And the whole thing is intensely leaves a very nasty taste in the mouth. Still, I bet he's a nice guy that loves his mum very much, eh? Anyway, do just have a glorious day. Sorry to make that a long one, but I thought it was worthwhile going into because it ticks all of the boxes. It's all of the stuff that we get from GB News and Talk TV and increasingly the rest of the legacy media about how bad everything is. Yeah, I personally don't mind Burnley. I quite like Burnley. Might be moving there soon. You never know. Still, I guess it's just because I have a right to. Only hope I can get a GP appointment in that no-go area. That's it, though. Anyway, enjoy.